On a summer weekend afternoon outside Anchorage, a teenage boy was running a mountain race he had trained for and knew well. He had run that course before. He knew where it climbed, where it leveled off, where the brush closed in tight enough to block the view of the ridge above. He was already past the halfway point, heading back down, when he drifted slightly off the marked trail. A few minutes later, he called his brother. He said a bear was chasing him. That was the last anyone heard from him. Searchers found him hours later, partway up the mountain. The bear was still there, guarding the body. A park ranger had to shoot it in the face just to drive it off. When state biologists reviewed the case, they did not hesitate to name what it was. This was not a mother defending cubs. It was not a startled animal reacting to a surprise encounter. It was a predatory attack. A black bear had looked at a lone teenager moving through its territory and decided he was food, then acted on it. What unsettled Alaska's wildlife officials was not just that it happened. It was that less than 2 days later, hundreds of miles away, it happened again. A contract worker at a remote mining site was attacked by a different black bear in a completely separate incident. 2 predatory black bear attacks, 2 days apart, in a state that had only ever recorded a small handful of cases like this in its entire documented history. One state biologist described it the only way that made sense to him. He said it was like getting struck by lightning twice. If you live in Alaska, or you have spent real time in that backcountry, tell us your borough or your region in the comments, because what we are about to walk through is probably something you already have a story about. Now, before we go further, let us be fair to the animal, because the numbers genuinely favor it. Alaska is home to one of the largest black bear populations in the country, with estimates running well past 100,000 animals. And across more than a century of combined records in Alaska and Canada, fatal predatory black bear attacks can be counted on 2 hands. State wildlife records covering roughly 3.5 decades list well over 200 bear-related attacks on people, and out of that entire span, only 3 were ever classified as fatal predatory black bear attacks. The overwhelming majority of those 100,000 bears will never approach a person with hunting intent. Statistically, you are in more danger on a bicycle or a snow machine than you are from a black bear. That baseline is real, and nothing in this video changes it. But hold on to that number, because this is exactly where the comforting story starts to fall apart. When researchers went back through more than 100 years of fatal black bear attacks across North America, they found something that does not match the shy, harmless image most people grew up with. Of the fatal attacks on record, nearly 9 out of 10 were classified as predatory. Not defensive, not accidental, predatory. A black bear that decided a person was the right size, was alone, and was worth the risk. There is a way wildlife officers learn to read the difference. A defensive bear is loud, jumpy, easy to spook, and looking for a way out. A bear that has decided to hunt you moves differently. It comes in quiet, head low, ears pinned back, locked onto you, closing the distance in a slow and steady line, sometimes circling in from behind through the brush. If a bear is doing that, it is not confused about what you are. It knows exactly what you are. That is the version of the bear that showed up at the remote mine site, roughly 200 miles north of Anchorage, the same weekend as the attack on the trail runner. A contractor working alone was attacked with no provocation, no food involved, nothing he had done wrong. The bear was put down on the spot. When biologists reviewed the case afterward, they could not point to a single factor that explained why that particular bear crossed the line that day. And notice who these attacks tend to find. Not careless tourists leaving food scattered around a campsite. The trail runner knew that race course by heart. The mine worker had spent years working remote ground in Alaska. The people most comfortable in that backcountry, the ones who stop scanning the tree line because it already feels like home, are often the ones a predatory bear has the easiest time reaching. A bear like that does not need you to make a mistake. It just needs you to stop paying attention. Go back further and the same fingerprint shows up again. Years earlier, a lone hunter working a river drainage in the southern part of the state was stalked for the better part of an afternoon by a black bear that never once acted defensive. He was carrying a rifle, moving carefully, doing everything a solo hunter in bear country is supposed to do. The bear circled him twice through heavy brush before he ever got a clean look at it, always staying just out of sight, always closing the gap a little more each pass. At one point, he lost track of it entirely for nearly 20 minutes, only for it to reappear closer than before, from a completely different direction than where he had last seen it. He ended the encounter before it became a statistic, but wildlife officers who reviewed his account afterward used the same word they use for the worst cases: stalking. Not a startled animal, not a mother with cubs nearby. An animal working a plan. This is where the easy explanation runs out of road. Because if this were only about bears trained on campground trash, these cases should cluster near towns and dumpsters. They do not. One happened on a well-marked mountain race course. The other happened on remote mining ground with no garbage bins anywhere nearby. Food conditioning alone does not cover a pattern like that. So what is actually going on? The first piece is population moving in opposite directions. Alaska's human population has grown steadily for decades, and with it, the number of people running, camping, fishing, and working in terrain that used to see almost no human traffic at all. Recreational use of remote backcountry, the exact kind of ground where these attacks keep happening, has climbed right alongside it. At the same time, the black bear population across much of the state has stayed high and stable. More people are entering bear territory, more often in more remote corners of the map than ever before. When researchers compared Alaska and Canada against the lower states, they found far more fatal attacks than bear population numbers alone would predict. The ratio does not line up. There are not proportionally that many more bears up north, yet the fatal encounters happen at a rate far beyond what the bear count alone should produce. It is not simply that there are more bears. It is that ground which used to belong almost entirely to them is now shared constantly with us in places far more remote than a campground parking lot. The second piece is the one you have likely heard before on this channel. Food conditioning. A bear that learns human presence means easy calories, from garbage, from pet food left outside, from camp scraps, gradually loses the instinct that once kept it away from people. That fear does not come back on its own. And a female bear that has learned to raid coolers and cabins passes that boldness down to her cubs, who grow up with no memory of a time when humans were something to avoid. Wildlife officers describe the walk of a food-conditioned bear almost the same way every time: direct, unhurried, confident, ears up, moving toward a person the way an animal moves towards something it has done 100 times before. Because in a lot of cases, it has. But this piece does not close the case either. Neither the trail runner nor the mine worker was anywhere near a dumpster or food left out in the open. Food conditioning explains the confident bear wandering into a campground looking for an easy meal. It does not explain a bear that appears out of nowhere on remote ground, with no food source anywhere close, and decides to hunt a lone person instead. Which brings us to the third piece, the one almost nobody talks about, and the one that may explain more than the first two combined. When researchers broke down exactly which bears carry out the overwhelming majority of fatal predatory attacks, they found it is not a random cross-section of the bear population. It is, overwhelmingly, one specific profile. Adult or subadult male bears, animals with far larger home ranges than females, that travel more, cross paths with people more often, and that some biologists believe carry a genuinely different tolerance for risk. This is not only a bear that learned something from us. In some cases, it is a specific type of bear that, because of its age, its sex, and its individual temperament, was always more willing to cross that line than the rest of the population around it. Genetics and individual behavior, not just proximity to people, appear to play a role that science still cannot fully separate out, and that is the uncomfortable part. This is not a problem that gets solved completely by storing food correctly or staying away from dumpsters. That specific male, with that specific temperament, can show up on the most remote ground imaginable, with none of the warning signs we have all been taught to look for. He is not drawn there by a smell or a memory of easy calories. He is simply covering more ground than any other bear around him, crossing paths with more people almost by mathematical certainty, and carrying whatever it is in his individual makeup that makes him more willing than the bear next to him to test whether a person might be worth the risk. If your own backcountry has a predator like this hiding in plain sight, tell us about it in the comments below, because it might be exactly what we cover next. None of these three pieces explains the full pattern on its own, and together they still do not add up to a clean answer. Population overlap tells you where the risk is rising. Food conditioning tells you why some bears lose their fear near people. Individual temperament tells you why certain bears cross a line that the rest of the population, living in the exact same conditions, never comes close to crossing. Stack all three together, and you still cannot predict, on any given morning, which bear on which trail is the one that matters. Alaska's own wildlife biologists have said it in almost these exact words. When it happens again, it feels like getting struck by lightning twice. They know it occurs. They cannot reliably tell you why this particular bear, on this particular day, at this exact point on the trail, chose to cross a line that thousands of other bears sharing the same ground never do. None of this means the Alaska backcountry is out to get you. The overwhelming majority of black bear encounters end exactly the way they are supposed to. The bear leaves, you keep hiking, and the only proof it was ever there is a set of tracks in the mud. That has not changed, and it is not going to. Most bears, most of the time, on most trails in this state, want absolutely nothing to do with a person standing upright on two legs. But the comforting line so many of us grew up hearing, that a black bear is always more afraid of you than you are of it, was always a statement about the average. It was never a guarantee written into every individual animal out there. And Alaska, every so often, produces the case that refuses to respect that average. So the next time you are on a trail in Alaska and you catch a dark shape watching you from the tree line, run the same checklist the people who work with these animals use every day. Is it restless, noisy, giving you room, looking for an exit? Then it is doing exactly what black bears have done for generations. It is a little afraid of you, good, but if it is silent, head low, ears pinned back, staring straight at you, closing the distance in a slow and unhurried line without making a sound, then you are looking at the one the research still cannot fully explain, and it has already decided what you are. Somewhere across the millions of acres of Alaska backcountry tonight, a few of them are still out there, quietly watching the trails, moving through country most people will never set foot in. And the truth no tourism board is ever going to print on a welcome sign is a simple one. We still do not fully know what makes one of them cross that line. We only know that, every so often, one of them does, and that the ones who cross it rarely look any different from the thousands who never will, right up until the moment they act. If your state has a predator hiding in plain sight just like this one, tell us which one in the comments because it is probably already on the list for our next video. And if you want to keep seeing which animals are quietly rewriting the rules across the American wild, hit subscribe because the next one is already on its way.